Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I am your co-host, Thomas Vick, joined by our co-host, Seth Wilson. Seth, how's it going today?
Thomas, I'm doing great. It is a wonderful day to be practicing law. We were talking about just how important our role is a lot of times in difficult times for families. And sometimes there's a lot of just joy and excitement about what we're doing in the estate planning world when it's maybe for a young couple with the first child and getting all the guardians in place and making sure that there's all the things and protections ready for that family. And sometimes it's at the other end of the life spectrum and you're dealing with loss and that's a hard thing. So that it's just a joy to be a part of that, but there's also a weight, if you will, that comes with that sometimes. So yeah, just kind of thinking about that as we got ready to record today.
As lawyers, we have a tremendous responsibility to serve clients throughout, all the situations of life that come up, and there are happy consultations, and then there are some frustrating consultations that we have, sad consultations. That's the nature of law, right? Law is there undergirding kind of everything that's happening in society. And as people are, going through stages in life and society, the law is there beside them, and lawyers are to walk beside clients throughout that situation. Days like that are reminders for why we do what we do, and it's all about putting the clients first and serving them to the best of our ability in the moment.
Yeah, and taking each situation as it comes. And I love that you touch on sort of that client service because the topic that we wanted to touch on today is how kind of the hiring process, but I think even more important than that is how do when you are bringing someone new into your team or your firm, how do you help them understand that culture of client service and client care and not just have it be a job that we do, but there's a bigger purpose in place for that. So thought it'd be a good topic for us today because your world is this is very fresh for you in terms of bringing someone new on board. So maybe start us out, if you would, on what was the process like for you in terms of even starting to look for someone, some of the decision points that went into that.
Yeah, so as far as deciding to hire somebody, the reason why I needed to hire somebody was because the law firm is growing and we can't get all the work done that we need to get done within our allotted time frame. And so we've got an overflow of work. So we got to bring in some more hands to help us accomplish that. And this is really the third staff person that I've hired in my law practice, which is pretty cool. After being a solo attorney, being my own receptionist, all that kind of stuff for several years. This is the third hire that I've made. And the sense of the timing of a new hire has always been the same for me. There's just kind of a gut feeling that I have. You kind of look at where am I at from a budget standpoint, but then also a workload standpoint. And if you've got the capacity to be able to pay somebody and you've got the workload to do it, jump on it. And in my opinion, I mean, you have to jump on it because you got to take advantage of that moment in time where you've got the resources to be able to take the risk and employ another person in the law firm. Because if you don't jump on at that moment in time, you might miss it. And instead of having a profitable law firm, then you're going to be expending resources and you may lose the moment, honestly. So you gotta find the right time and take advantage of it. But that was really the thought process in hiring somebody.
Yeah, and I appreciate how you captured that idea of that moment of it's really a risk assessment. And do I take the risk and do I not? And we'll talk in a minute about how you help decrease the level of risk in terms of some things to look for and those kind of things. But as you think about that particular station where you are, the numbers that you've hopefully been reviewing. We've talked about that on prior episodes of the podcast, of just helping you have a sense of where things are to cross check your gut feel and make sure that there's some level of objectivity to counter the subjectivity, but recognizing that both have their place in helping you make an informed decision about, is now the right time to hire. If we presume that we've made the decision to hire someone, what's typically your next step in terms of finding an appropriate candidate?
Well, I mean, there may be somebody in mind that you have that you want to hire, but for me, I just used Indeed.com. This isn't an advertisement for Indeed, but maybe we can get a sponsorship eventually from Indeed.com. But they do a pretty good job, and you're able to sponsor a job on their website, and that actually provided a lot of resumes that went into, eligible candidates, and it's pretty great to see, a lot of people interested in a job. There's always kind of a fear of, you've got a job available, but does anybody really want it? And so through that sponsored ad on Indeed.com, I was able to get quite a number of applicants. And on on the Indeed platform, it's pretty neat. You're able to schedule video interviews, and just directly on the Indeed platform. You don't have to go to Zoom or any other kind of video platform, Teams or whatnot. And so it's really convenient to be able to schedule somebody, and you can get a lot done in the interview process pretty efficiently. Yeah, that's how I did it. And you look at resumes and you look at job experience, and what's important to you as far as the role is concerned. And yeah, that's kind of what I did to find candidates.
Awesome. And that there's multiple platforms out there that help with that. So using one or the other is probably going to be based a little bit on personal preference. We talk a lot about a certain practice management tool here, and there's others out there. So find something that sort of fits the niche that you're looking for, or find something that will generate a large enough pool of candidates for you to review and kind of have a good sense of what's available in the marketplace. Then what was your process for sort of filtering that list and deciding who was going to get an interview?
Well, for me, a lot of it is experience. Do you have the right kind of experience to be able to step into a law firm and handle the ins and outs of that? And for me, that's not necessarily going to paralegal curriculum, and getting a certificate. It's really about, what have you done in your work environment? What experiences do you have? Have you had a situation where you've been entrusted with responsibility and you've done well? What kind of capability have you shown to grow in a role? And, are you able to learn things on the fly? That kind of stuff is important to me, more so than, a bachelor's degree, or, a college degree or a master's degree. That's not as important to me as just being able to do the job. And so somebody that has experience with, managing people, managing projects, that's more important to me than, somebody that got straight A's or A's and B's in college.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. You've had the experience and capability now to have gone through this process a few times. And I suppose we should clarify right now, at least my thought process is talking about hiring a team member, not necessarily an attorney. I think that would be a little bit different discussion. But adding someone to the team who sort of fits what the need is and has the requisite experience and potentially skills. I know in the past where I have felt like the individual was the right candidate, sometimes the skill set wasn't quite there. And so the decision was, do I hire and help train and equip on that particular skill? Or is this not going to be a good candidate at this time because that particular skill wasn't there? And that could be any part of the puzzle. One of the most basics that I've seen and experienced, and maybe you saw this as well, is do you know how to type? And that's a big deal in what we do because we spend so much time inputting data into computers. And I think there's lack of training on that front now in the school systems, and you're seeing that in the candidates that you see. So, kind of a silly example, but ultimately very important for what we needed in those scenarios. And that skill set may or may not have been there. So it's another tool to decide if that's a filter or if that's going to be something you're willing to take on as a training measure to teach the skill that's needed, because some of the other qualifications and experience actually meet the requirements of what I need in that time.
Yeah, I'm the same way, Seth, as far as being comfortable with technology. It's more important to me that you be comfortable with technology and adapting to the processes that we're continuing to develop in my law practice, rather than having worked for an attorney for 20 or 30 years and now you just want another job. Kind of want somebody that's able to adapt to the technology changes that are coming, that are so exciting, that we talk about all the time on the podcast. So you got to kind of have the wherewithal to be able to deal with those changes. But yeah, that's definitely an important qualification. It's more than just like a skill set. It's kind of underlying a skill set. You can develop the skill set, but if you're comfortable with technology, you can develop it from there.
Yeah, and that's an important point because at different levels of interest, you'll get different levels of results. And so if you are a tech forward law firm and always trying new things and always changing the process to try to get it to be as optimal as it can be, that's probably going to frustrate someone who doesn't have that underlying sort of outlook on life. And so you've got to make sure that if that's the desired outcome for your firm and your team, that the pieces of the puzzle that make up your team are supporting that. Because otherwise, that's going to require a lot of extra effort on your part. And it's really potentially not even a good fit because of that underlying issue. And obviously, that can be expanded to other areas of personality and different things that could be there as well. And so you want to be careful about trying to figure out all of the pieces of the puzzle and how they fit together.
Yeah, yeah, you got to be aware of. It was important to me that we have a cohesive team camaraderie. That's one of the cool things about having your law firm. You kind of develop, as your law firm develops, team members start to develop camaraderie with one another, and you want to make sure that you hire the right person that is going to not upset that camaraderie, but is actually going to add to it and make it even better. And you know, I think that goes to show, have a good interview process, take your time, make sure that you get the right person so that you can continue to have a great place to work. I remember telling my team members that there are no jerks allowed to work here. If there is a jerk, it's me, but I own the place. uh, and I don't, I'm trying not to be a jerk. But yeah, you gotta hire the right fit for the rest of your team members.
It's such an important point to take your time. There should not be a scenario where you're rushing through a hiring process, because if you do so, it's going to probably cost you way more time in the long run because you're going to have something that just doesn't fit well. And so take your time, make sure that you have the right gut feel, the right skill set, the right analysis done for the person to help get you to where you're wanting to go for that position. And I think on small teams and large teams, but probably even more important on small teams, is that chemistry aspect. How does this person fit in with the culture that we have here? If I hire somebody that has my personality and I'm the person in charge, are we going to clash? Is there going to be, a personality issue because we're both sort of led to lead, if you will, in a particular direction? And so you just need to be aware of some of those things and make sure that as they can, they complement and support what's going on for where you're trying to go for that next level. position. So as you've gone through the process, you've interviewed and started to make the decision, then you actually make the offer and the person accepts. And once that happens in your world, then walk us through kind of what the next steps are in terms of onboarding the individual to the office.
Well, there's a lot for sure at every level of law office management, really. I had to add another office in order to hire this person. And so I had to furnish that office. Getting just the physical office ready for the hire is part of it. Are you going to need to get a new desk, the new technology, a printer, computer, monitor, keyboard, chair, conference room table, if there perhaps all that stuff has to be thought through. And maybe we're just getting sponsored. No, we're not getting sponsored, but I've done a lot of purchasing through Amazon.com recently. So you got to do that so they have a place to be. But beyond that, you got to get them enrolled on your payroll. I use Paychex, so I got to get them enrolled on Paychex. But then, when you're actually training them up on your law office procedures, it's really helpful to have an operations manual to at least give them an idea of what they're going to do on a daily basis. At least what topics are you going to have to deal with? What areas of law are, practiced here in the law firm? I don't have a perfect operations manual, but I have worked on it from time to time. I typically will, take the task list from Clio and copy and paste it and, put it into the operations manual. So there's a little bit of an idea of what needs to happen in a single. So I think that is maybe a good introduction to what the individual is going to have to do on a day-to-day basis, but there certainly is more to it than that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is so important is making sure that that new hire paperwork is completed. And there is, I think, a tendency to, okay, we did all the work, great, we found somebody. We have on this end done a lot of work, a lot of review, a lot of mental energy has been expended to decide if this is the right person and go through that process. But that's not even half the battle because now you have all of the realities coming in. Where is this person going to sit? What equipment is going to be needed? What accounts are they going to need access to? Do I have enough licenses? Do I have to go buy more licenses? Do I need another phone? How are they going to have internet access? All the stuff that allows them to get the job done. And what is that person most likely thinking of? How am I going to get paid? So you got to have that process figured out. And I'm glad you mentioned Paychex, but some type of payroll provider needs to walk through that onboarding process and make sure that you have the necessary information to ensure that you're paying these folks properly, not getting a situation where having their taxes withheld correctly and they end up with a bad scenario down the road. So you got to take care of both the law firm side and the need that's there, but also recognize that whoever's coming on needs to know that, okay, I'm going to get paid next week and the week after and the week after, right? They're going to have some stability there and feel some comfort with that so they can focus on learning potentially new vocabulary. I don't know what a grantor is. I don't know what a trustee is. I don't know what a personal representative is. And having those operations manual can help increase the vocabulary and give you a little bit of confidence as a new person to whatever that law firm environment may look like. Maybe you've never heard the term plaintiff or defendant. You don't know what a caption is or a header. There's just so much that is there to learn that if the foundational piece is a little shaky, and we haven't built on top of that in terms of, okay, we're going to take care of you. You got a place to sit. You got a place to do your work. You have your paycheck. You have this. Those things build on each other, help increase their chance of success and getting off the ground and running in a short time frame.
Absolutely. Also, maybe get them a daily written planner, like we talked about a week or two ago, to have something that they can write down and take notes on throughout the day. They may not be putting tasks into Clio constantly like we are. So maybe you have something that they can kind of keep track of their tasks and keep them organized. But yeah, it's a big deal to come into a law firm and learn new vocabulary, just a new world in a lot of ways. And the more that you can do to make people feel comfortable, the better off you will be, and better chance of success, I would say.
Yeah, I would add to this, I would encourage you to think through what level of accessibility you will allow or need to allow when you've onboarded someone new as well. Because as you're thinking about, well, the reason we brought this person on is because we have all this extra work that needs done. That's not going to get done without the training piece. And there's going to be questions. And so, especially in a smaller environment, is your door always open? Can you always intercom? Can you call? Can you text? Can you Teams? All of those kind of methods need to be addressed and expectations outlined as best you can. Sometimes you may have to say, look, I'm going to be out of the office the next day or two with court. I know you're not going to have a whole lot to do, and that's okay. What I want you to do is read, the model rules of professional conduct. I want you to read the operations manual. I want you to go download a copy of the trial rules and read those, because you'll just get some familiarity. But it's going to require some onboard planning, even beyond the physical space and the electronic access to everything. There's going to be those things. And so as you're preparing for that, make sure you're building that into your schedule to make yourself available as best you can to provide that training in time to resource, answer questions, help make sure that everybody's introduced, and make it a fun thing for the person to become part of the team that's they're
Yeah.
joining.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. Reserving time to make sure that you're there and available to answer questions, and to give some direct training to the new hire. I think that's really important as well.
Well, good. Well, Thomas, we've covered a lot of ground today. Obviously, that's not the be all end all. There's obviously a lot of legal requirements to be aware of when you're going through interviewing process and hiring and those kind of things. So make sure that if you're going through that, you've taken a look at that requirement, know what questions are appropriate to ask in an interview, what may not be appropriate to ask in an interview. How are you going to handle those kind of things as you walk through that process and finding the ideal candidate for your firm? So, Thomas, thanks so much for the time today and allowing us a peek behind the curtain a little bit at your process there. Where can folks go to find out more about building a lifetime legacy lawyer firm?
Well, the best place to go is youtube.com and search for Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast. And you can also check out anywhere you get your podcasts. We just encourage you to hit subscribe, like this podcast, and share it so that other like-minded attorneys who are considering opening up their law firm or continuing their solo or small law firm can find it and use us as a resource.
Yeah, and I would add to that, if there's any questions or comments, make sure you put those out there as well. There's always a follow-up question, something obvious maybe that we overlooked and it's part of the process that would be helpful for folks to know. Love to address that or answer those questions as we move forward. So, Thomas, thanks again for the time today, and we'll see everybody soon.
Thanks, Seth.